Shaken by yet another alcohol-related death by a teenager in her district, City Council member Nancy Pyle decided to take the lead on the social host ordinance for San Jose City Council, which passed unanimously in May of 2012. This is a documentary about social host ordinances and about why adults need to take responsibility for underage drinking parties as well as their neighborhoods. The alcohol industry over the years has infiltrated every part of our community. Not only are they advertising in magazines that young people read, but they also make sure that you can buy alcohol wherever you can buy liquids. And it's not just your corner liquor store, it's almost everywhere, and even some gas stations. So it has become so normal to see alcohol everywhere, not just on a billboard.
Well, you know, there's a new generation, and I think the mass media has overtaken that new generation. And it's not like when I was a kid. There's a lot of alcohol like within steps away from you now. Stores, locations, all kinds of grocery stores now sell hard liquor. So it's a lot different than when we grew up, where there wasn't as many places to buy and there wasn't all this advertising. It's a new environment.
When I was learning about the social host ordinance and about alcohol, what surprised me was how it is around us and how we don't even catch it. Like with the movies, with the magazines, how they show the teenagers drinking and everything. They make it look so good, but you don't catch that when you're flipping through a magazine or looking at a movie. You don't take the time to see all the celebrities are grabbing a beer and drinking it like nothing.
The kids get all kinds of double messages. There's the message at school and the message at home that you're under 21, don't you drink, and yet there's all this advertising targeted at them. There's uncoordinated ordinances that are inconsistently applied that up against house parties. So
and then
when
the alcopops, the fruit juice, alcohol drinks that are palatable to drink because alcohol tastes awful.
Oh yeah. They go down easy and they go down quick.
The alcohol industry is fearless in their outreach to young people to gather new customers. Our job is to try and help thwart that and divert them and try and keep their hands off our young people. And there's a variety of ways that we can do that. We often target parents, thinking the parents are the problem. And in every underage drinking incident, there was an adult involved. Someone sold it, someone provided it, and it's our job to break that linkage so that adults will start to support young people in choosing not to use alcohol and creating environments where alcohol is more difficult to access.
When talking to young people, where do you get your alcohol? And the biggest place, the most common place, is underage drinking parties in the home. And so when you get this social norm that alcohol's not that bad, it's not like shooting heroin on the street, drinking at home seems safe. That is very shocking to me that this has crept into our society.
It has become easier for teenagers and kids to get because some liquor stores don't even ask for IDs, or they can just get somebody older that's just walking into the store to buy chips or soda or pay for gas, anything, and they just give them money and they'll walk out with their alcohol beverages. Yeah, I think it's really easy for teenagers and kids to get their hands on alcohol nowadays.
My favorite thing about the Friday Night Life Club was this park cleanup that we did. We picked up alcohol bottles, people would leave, bottle caps, any little alcohol container. And this is serious because, you know, little kids are playing on the playground and they're seeing these bottles. They're curious of what they are, and then that's how their brain like starts thinking like, oh, what is this? Older kids too, like they see them, they're like, oh, we can do this too, since it's on a park. So that was interesting.
What we have done is we've looked at what can contain, or what kind of tool can we use to change the environment, because we know when people have an alcohol problem, they have to deal it with themselves. However, we look at the environment. What can we do to change it? So one of the environmental prevention tools is a social host ordinance. And the reason why we support it is so that we have a reason to go out into the community and get adults and teenagers to talk about alcohol.
A social host ordinance is one of the tools that communities can use to help reduce underage drinking. The social host ordinance basically provides clear guidance for police and other people in the community on how to handle parties, house parties, where police who are responding to a disturbing the peace kind of call, where they arrive and they find underage drinkers.
We could have someone furnishing alcohol to a minor. We could have a minor in possession of alcohol. Those are all criminal citations, and we probably would go down that road before we would go down the social host ordinance. This is a tool for the officers to have in the event that there isn't a criminal ordinance that they can enforce, and it is a civil penalty in the fact that we can see that there's consumption of alcohol going on, or even that alcohol is being provided to underage drinking being done in the house and in the presence of the officers.
What happens in communities that don't have a social host ordinance is that typically police respond to a call, they find underage drinking, and the hosting youth can be cited. There is no adult responsibility. What the social host ordinance does is it brings the adults into the equation, whereby they respond to a call, they find underage drinking. The adult host, so it could be the 21-year-old that is there hosting the party, it could be the parents who own the home, they wind up being accountable for the drinking that's going on there, the illegal drinking that's going on.
We can see this really working in situations where kids throw parties where the parents are out of town. Do you know what your kids are doing? Is there alcohol being furnished? Is there alcohol being drunk? And if there's not a criminal violation being involved, is that something that we can take action from an administrative citation, and Title 10 could allow the officers to do that?
We come with a culture that is normal to have alcohol in the house. And it's very sad because the risk is a lot. It's a lot of problems they come out with alcohol, domestic violence, you know, the kids, they become very rebel to the parents. Their grades go down, you know. They start going out for a party, you know, without knowing. It's like more often and more often until they have a disease.
Any child that uses alcohol before 15 has a very high prevalence of having some problem with drinking later on in their life, as I think happened with the cigarette industry when young people were targeted 30 years ago. I don't think the science has changed in terms of how they're identifying who will be their next generation of customers.
I think, you know, when you're in business, you try to increase your profits. And you try to increase your market share, and so you want more and more people to use your product. We had a sort of a demographic change in society where there was this bulge of baby boomers, and there wasn't so many people after them. The birth rate went down. So in the United States, for example, less and less people in their mid-20s, less and less children. So they had to go in the two different directions, older and younger.
Certainly the alcohol industry knows that if they can get a young person engaged with their brand early, that they'll stick with that brand for a very long time. So if you take a look, you'll find that almost every distilled spirits brand has something that's brightly colored, sweetly flavored, that will entice a young drinker into their brand line. We'd like to help young people understand that that doesn't have to be the case and that they're being played. And when young people understand that they're being played, they make better decisions and they don't want to be a part of it.
Noticing now what I noticed through Friday Night Live, it's more eye-catching to me, so I'm a little bit more aware of the advertising that alcohol does. I try not to get too influenced by how cool it looks, by the color or the smell or whoever's drinking it or promoting it. I try to stay away from all that, regardless of whether it looks cool or not.
Alco Pops is a sweetened beverage that contains large amounts of alcohol. We've had a situation where Alco Pops were sold next to soda pop in the stores. So when you reach for a soda pop, you can reach for an Alco Pop at the same time. It was a marketing tool where you're marketing really underage drinkers. And it turned out especially women drinkers. The labeling law, we got that law into effect where everything in California has to have a readable label saying how much alcohol, what percentage of alcohol is in the bottle or can. And everybody will know up front it contains alcohol. Here's what the percentage of alcohol is. That establishes a warning system for people so they're aware. So if a parent buys something or if they see a kid with a can, a teacher in the classroom, something that looks like a soda pop, he can go over there and say, aha, this is alcohol on it. Before, we had teachers coming to us saying they had no idea whether or not alcohol was in there or alcohol wasn't in there. That's been a very effective law in helping people control the use of alcohol with underage kids.
The new research shows that the brain does not fully develop until you're 25 years old. And we know that during the teenage years, you're supposed to be experimenting with, you know, you get stressed, and how do you deal with stress? You experiment with relationships, and, you know, what do you do about that? And school, and the possibility of working, all these things. It's all part of an experimentation, sport, music, you name it. Unfortunately, alcohol and drugs have become part of that arena that teenagers are experimenting with. And because of the vulnerability of the teenage brain, because it's not fully developed, we realize that adults need to be more responsible to make sure alcohol and also other drugs are not inside the experimental region where teenagers hang out.
Fortunately, in the last 10-15 years, there's been incredible advancements in brain imaging technologies. So they now can study the live human brain like never before, and you can actually see brain images that show what happens to the brain during alcohol abuse and alcoholism. This is young adult brain, and this is some imaging done by Paul Thompson at UCLA with the National Institutes of Mental Health, and it's an amazing study. You can see it shows the brain from 5 through 20 and on through 25. And what happens is up until 12, we are starting all those neural connections as we grow and we experience and we hear and we listen.
So that's all the yellow and the reds.
Right. And then from 12 on is when we start to prune those that are either redundant or not used, and strengthen those that are. So if you introduce alcohol at that time, that's why it's particularly problematic, because the ages, what's developing last is emotion, memory, learning, motivation, and judgment. And I think it's just very telling why then so many are addicted before the age of 21, nearly half, and 2/3 by 25. So it's really a young person's disease, but oftentimes people takes another 10-15 years before they get help, so we have this impression that it's adults.
Right.
But it's also why it's difficult for schools or parents to accept that drinking just isn't something that all kids go through. On the left is a non-drinker, and on the right is a heavy drinker. And it's the absence of the red and the pink areas on the right that are showing the compromised brain functioning during this memory task. So this is what scientists are now able to see and how they understand the addiction process better.
The cognitive, the higher functioning skills, the command center of the brain does mature until you're 25. So anything you do in the way of a substance that changes that chemistry is going to affect the ultimate outcome of the brain and how the individual looks at the external environment and the choices that person makes.
Until about 24 or 25, the brain simply isn't developed enough to make good decisions. The people who know that best are the rental car companies, because you can't rent a car until you're 24 or 25. But right now, you can go and get a drink at 21.
Kids that are involved in music or other kind of art activities, not only is it a pro-social activity, but it stimulates the development of their cognitive abilities. Children that have been involved in music and art show a much higher ability to get into college, to do better in school, because they're challenging their brain rather than not using those faculties of stimulation that are necessary. Unfortunately, alcohol being used by kids shuts off that creative side of a child, which should be being flourished in those teenage years.
When I learned about the age development of the brain, that was a big thing to me, because now I know that I don't want to drink, because I want to continue to learn. Like, I'm going to college, and you know, there's a lot of things to be learned in life, and I don't want just by drinking one thing that my brain is going to be affected by that.
One of the things I will recommend is to educate the parents, because a lot of times they are unaware, like these kind of things that happen in their houses. I know a lot of my neighbors, they get out and leave the house for a couple days, and that's when the kids, they take advantage of that.
When I leave town, I let all my neighbors know, I'm leaving, the kids are going to be here. If you hear or see anything, do call the police. I let the kids know. Everybody knows that you are going to be here unsupervised. If you know that I'm going to find out if you have anybody over. Typically, what led up to that with my kids was more of a conversation. And it prompts conversations between parents and their kids about the values that they have and what they expect in behavior. Now, if parents are having trouble already and they want some help, this is a good time for parents to step forward and say, I need some help. Where can I go?
As a chair for the Mayfair NAC, we support the social host ordinance. We're gonna do some workshops to educate the parents on the problems there are when these kids underage, they drinking. And not only the problem of drinking, but the consequences they facing with that.
I have 9 years old and 8 years old now, you know, that I carry with them in the meetings and participating in this coalition, because they need to learn all the risks, all the things that could happen with the alcohol and drugs.
By the time a child has become a 14 or 15-year-old, they've set many of their social connections. And so either they're identifying with a very healthy part of the population, or they tend to go with a subgroup that may or may not use alcohol, drugs, and cigarettes as part of the way they relate to each other. It takes adults to communicate to them the effects of early drinking, and it takes a lot of education around the community as to how not to have a proponent of this is really the cool thing to do, this is okay to drink. It needs to be, this is not okay to drink, this is not part of your development.
When you have that conversation, it's vital, because otherwise the youth is left to not really have any kind of direction, and they'll go off to that one party where there really are no adults anywhere, and it'll be a disaster. At the forum where we had the youth and adults talk together, that was a really good platform, because they were able to see what the other one was thinking, and ideas that adults came up with that students had never heard were voiced, and vice versa. It was a really good collaborative effort to understand both sides.
I think prevention and early intervention need to be much more vigorously pursued. To wait until a child has a problem or an adult has a problem, you've lost all of that opportunity early on when there was exploration going on to change the path. So we need to figure how we work with all of the social departments that are working with kids and really get the message out that there's another way to develop yourself that doesn't mean you have to associate with alcohol and drug use. There are other things you need to achieve well before becoming a social drinker in your life.
Even though they're teenagers, they are children. They're not fully developed in terms of their brain and so forth. We have to realize they need guidance, and I think the parents are responsible for that. And if they do things that are going to lead to consequences like drinking and driving, by children coming to their home and drinking and then taking off and driving somewhere, I think that's irresponsible. So we need to have those ordinances that make the parents or the person providing the alcohol responsible. That's what a social ordinance does.
So if the adults are not there, I've heard parents say, well, if I'm not there, I can control my teenager. Why should I be responsible? How would you respond to that?
My response to that is that if your dog gets out of your yard and bites someone walking by, you are liable whether you're at the house or not. So why would a parent not be responsible for what the underage teens are doing in their home?
I want to live in a safe environment where it's not normal for teens to access alcohol drinks from house parties. Teens have enough pressure put on them, and drinking should not be one of them. However, it is still easily accessible at home. Passing this ordinance will make everyone more responsible.
The Youth Commission has affirmed that it is extremely important for not only youth to be held responsible for their actions and the consumption of alcohol, but for adults as well.
It's a civil ordinance as opposed to a criminal ordinance, so there would be a discretion for the officers, obviously, to find out and what happened, where the person had been drinking, if they've been drinking at that party, and obviously a lot of time for them to get to the bottom of that. But I think the important issue to ease the concern is it's a civil ordinance as opposed to a criminal, so they wouldn't be criminally cited.
I really want to salute Layla representing the Youth Commission so well, and I know the Youth Commission played a huge role in getting this forward. And I know that it will save lives, and the reality is we hope that we never have to use it. We hope that just by passing this, the education, the outreach, and the youth helping gets the word out there so adults will be more responsible in regards to how they monitor the youth and monitor their children.
I couldn't go another year without doing something to bring some sanity to this situation. Will this be the answer? Will this be the final, ta-da, we've got it? Absolutely not. And will this social host ordinance be undergoing a lot of nuances, a lot of change? Absolutely.
We have a motion on the floor, as made earlier by Councilmember Pyle. On that motion, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion is approved unanimously. Congratulations, everyone. That concludes our work on that item.
Guess where the beer is and where the alcohol is? It's usually in the refrigerator.